Great innovation stories make change possible. Each week on the Innovation Storytellers podcast, I invite innovation leaders to share how they overcame the obstacles to introduce breakthrough ideas to the world through the power of story. I'm featuring guests from Tesla, TD Ameritrade, Corning, Cisco, Bloomberg, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can tell a more effective innovation story and change the future for the better. Hey everybody, it's Susan Lindner. I'm your host of Innovation Storytellers, where we talk about a little inside baseball of how the sausage gets made around innovating in really large companies. So I'm really excited with my guest today. I have Karen Leonard, and Karen is, well, she's someone very special in this universe because it's one thing to be doing innovation in small sections, right? And tucked away in our own little innovation bubble. It is completely different when we are doing innovation in a $9 billion company. So let me just give you a little bit of background on Karen. She has been bringing new solutions to market for more than 2 decades. From her deep expertise in product management, data and analytics, Karen has successfully launched new software products and data-driven services to customers around the globe. As Willis Towers Watson's head of innovation, she leads global and cross-business initiatives to support the company's growth strategy. And her team fuels the organization's innovation pipeline by incubating early-stage concepts and fostering a culture of experimentation using things like design thinking and rapid prototyping methodologies that really make a difference inside of a big company. In 2019, Karen started the Willis Towers Watson Growth Board, whose purpose is to invest in disruptive and transformational projects that can open up new markets, customer channels, and business. I am just absolutely thrilled that you are with us today, Karen. I know you're going to have a lot of wisdom to share with our listeners. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Susan.
20 years in innovation. I don't even think Mark Zuckerberg can say that. Talk to us a little bit about how you got into it. How did you get into innovation, Karen?
Well, I guess I'd go back to a job I had in grad school. I was working at a research company where I was a statistical analyst, doing conjoint modeling for clients, helping them identify what product configurations they should sell at what price. So we were doing all the modeling ourselves and presenting them with the results. But of course, our clients wanted to be able to run scenarios themselves, and they wanted to use the data to do ad hoc queries. So my boss came to me one day and said, "Do you know how to write a software program in C++ in order to do this?" And I said, "No, I think Fortran in college," which is dating myself, right?
We are dating ourselves, Fortran. I think there's like a quiet team in India that's still keeping Fortran alive somewhere for giant companies everywhere.
I've never used Fortran since. And I barely passed that course, actually. But he threw me this C+ for Dummies book and said, "Well, do you think you can figure this out?" And I said, "Sure, I'll give it a go." But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, this is going to be a colossal failure. But eventually, I started digging into this book and writing the software. And eventually, I wrote this piece of software that read in the conjoint data and allowed our clients to use it through the user interface, run different scenarios to estimate what their sales would be for different product configurations. And clients loved it. And after several iterations, tweaking it based on client feedback, the company started selling it as a product. So that was my first foray into what I guess would now be called innovation.
And how did that feel?
I don't know. To me, it just felt like my job. And and I'd have to say, like subsequent years as a product manager, which I can get into, but throughout my career, before the word innovation became popular, and I actually think it's an overused word now because I must hear it 1,000 times a day, but that felt like it was my job, and just bringing new solutions to market and working with clients and customers to produce something that was going to solve a problem for them.
Yeah. And do it better and faster than whatever we were using before.
Right. Exactly.
That's so funny. C plus for dummies. I have on my shelf Overcoming Procrastination for Dummies, and I still haven't finished it. So I will let you know.
They have really branched out in their books now.
Oh yeah. Right. It's not just for wannabe coders anymore. There's a dummy's guide for just about anything. So many amazing guests that we've had on the show talk about the challenges in coming up with a great idea. The challenge is actually winding it through a large corporation between layers and layers of people, of processes, of committees, of budget discussions. Tell us a little bit about the journey, how you got to your current role.
Yeah. So I finished grad school and left that job. And then I went to, that was in Philadelphia. I moved across country to the Bay Area and I started working at Allstate, also doing statistical analysis to help them determine their product and marketing strategies. And that was at their research facility in Menlo Park. And that was interesting and a great experience. And I went to a research conference in Beaver Creek one summer. And truth be told, I decided to take the afternoon off from the conference and go whitewater rafting instead, and met some folks from Apple there. And they said, "Hey, we have a job open. Why don't you come work with us?" So I ended up at Apple working on new hardware and software product development, which of course was mind-blowing and really exciting.
Can you tell us what products?
Lots of new hardware products and software products that were back in, and including the portables, the PowerBook line that had just come out, including the new, of course it was new at the time, the Macs for home offices. We're just branching out into the home space from the major graphic design and school space. So lots of different, including the Newton, which was the Mac or the Apple version of Palm Pilot. Yes.
Oh, yes. Don't we all know how angry Steve Jobs got in the movie for there being a stylus, right? Right. The rage when he came back to Apple.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So I think the lesson learned there was the most exciting things at conferences might actually be happening outside the conference.
Amen. Amen. When in doubt, take a break.
Right. Yeah. And then, from there, I joined some Apple alumni at JavaSoft, which was then a newly formed division of Sun Microsystems. And I was a product manager leading a line of Java-based software products. And so there I got to do start to finish, from idea inception, working with the engineers, launching the new products to global customers. So that was really a great experience. But then my life took a turn. I met my husband at JavaSoft and we started a family, and I wanted to take some time off. And so we moved out of the Bay Area down here to Southern California, where we are today. And at some point, I connected with these two guys who were starting a company. And for whatever reason, I thought this was a great idea with a baby at home to join a startup.
Sure.
Right.
That's the second baby in the picture.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I helped them get the company off the ground. And over 10 years or so, we built the company into a successful business and sold it to Deloitte, which is how I actually ended up in my current position, because one of my Deloitte clients knew some folks at Willis Towers Watson, and they introduced me, and we really hit it off. And I came to work here at WTW about 6 or 7 years ago.
Wow. So what a transition from whitewater rafting to Apple to JavaSoft. And even in the world of startups. So you really have this very holistic background of understanding innovation in lots of different forms.
Yes, it's been lots of different forms. I feel like I've needed to be pretty adaptable. I think as many of us are, right? Because you never know where your journey is going to take you.
Yeah. And so can you tell us a little bit about getting the products to their finish line? How does it work in larger companies? What's the obstacle, do you think, that a lot of innovators like yourself face along the way?
Well, as far as, let's say, an idea through concept stage, through development, at WTW, we're actually working on a really big new product right now. It's the most disruptive project we at WTW, I think, have ever undertaken. It's around digital broking. It's really going to transform.
Say that again. It's around digital
broking. So
what's broking?
So we're in insurance. A big piece of our business is in insurance brokerage. And that the process for broking insurance hasn't changed a whole lot in hundreds of years. But now finally insurance companies are really looking at digital. So it really would transform the way our business operates and really transform the whole insurance value chain. But the idea originated actually about this time last year. Right now, we're running our big annual innovation challenge. We call it Horizons. It's open to all colleagues around the globe. We get a lot of great ideas. This actually started with two separate ideas, two separate teams with colleagues in different businesses had related ideas, let's say, but neither one was really that transformative on its own. So we put these two teams together and said, you each are working on a really intriguing concept. Can you put your heads together? So they did, and they came up with an idea that was really a game changer. So you've always heard two heads are better than one. In this case, two teams, especially with colleagues from different businesses and different points of view. So the way our challenge works is the top finalists pitch their ideas to our CEO and executive team. And the team did that. And that was one of the projects that we chose to then go into prototyping and testing, which is really 2 sprints, about 2 months per sprint. And during that time, they flesh out their idea or their concept with feedback from clients. I think that's so important to really get some client feedback from users. I mean, we did that a lot at Apple as well. Get feedback from users and potential customers, and doing design sessions with stakeholders, and then come back with the recommendations for the investment to build it. And that's where we are now with that one. We're about to pilot the first iteration of this concept. And then, of course, learn from those and keep iterating and building out the development from there.
So we can't know what this is just yet, though, right? It's still under wraps.
It's still under wraps. Well, keep you posted when we go out with our pilots and we can formally announce it.
That's going to be so exciting. So you think that's this year?
Oh, yeah. It's going to be this summer.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. So some of the obstacles, so there's so many interesting things to unpack here. Number one is doing employee-based innovation, where you call on the brightest minds, which are your own minds, right? The ones inside the company who can see the opportunities, can see the challenges that need to be fixed, right? And can cite the ways, who already have really great ideas on how to fix them or how to create something new. How do you foster that culture of innovation internally to get employees excited around a program like Horizon?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of different efforts, but we do a lot of communications, enticing people and encouraging people to submit their ideas. This is the 5th year. This year will be the 5th year we have done Horizons. So certainly we have seen the engagement grow over time as colleagues understand how this works, as the word gets out, as they see the innovations coming to life, as they hear stories from people who have been involved, their colleagues who have gone through this, and who can tell their stories about what a fantastic experience it was. We've really worked at getting more women involved. And that's one of my passions, is getting more women involved in innovation. I worked in high tech. I could see the disproportionate, ratios of men to women. And even here, our first year doing Horizons, we only had, I think it was 24% of the ideas submitted by women the first year. Last year, we had 46% of the ideas by women. And in fact, last year was the first time we'd ever had a woman win the competition. We picked 3 winners a year. And until last year, they had all been men. Last year, all 3 of the winning teams were led by women. So that was a huge thing for us. And so we've changed the program slightly to try to bring in more women. And we've also done, modified our communications, the imagery we use being more female oriented and featuring women. We have made it more team based, which ends up with better ideas anyway. The first year, the vast majority of ideas submitted were from individuals. And most of them, of course, 76% were from men. Then we started really promoting team-based submissions. And like I said, that diversity of thought, as well as other aspects of diversity, made the quality of ideas so much better.
Well, if there's anyone who understands risk management, it's an insurance company, right? And so when you think about what's the risk of me submitting an idea, proposal, et cetera, like that can feel a little scary, but the opportunity to do that, I think that's so smart, Karen, to say like, let's offer the opportunity to propose it as a team. It minimizes the risk for the person coming up with the idea. And it also means, wow, even if I get this, I don't even know if I could implement it and execute it. At least there's a team doing it together with me that we could shoulder the burden collectively in the event that we win.
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head. Exactly.
Yeah. And not to mention, it's so much more fun doing it as a group. And I have to say, I was so impressed when I got on a call together with your team and found 4 other brilliant women staring back at me on the Zoom call. And there was a part of me going, are we waiting for other people to join? Because it had been so foreign to me in my experience of working with innovation teams to have an all-woman team. And I was reminded of thinking of Ruth Bader Ginsburg saying, when are you going to be satisfied? What's the right number of women on the court? And she was like, all of them. You've never had a problem with it to this point, right? Of having an all male court. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. So yeah, our perceptions are changing, and certainly the workforce dynamics are changing too, which is another specialty of Willis Towers Watson, is understanding workplace dynamics probably better than anyone else. So, these kinds of competitions, right? I don't know if you refer to it that way, are great to help get innovations to their finish line, right? Because they have a definitive beginning, middle, and end. And now you've established a track record with Horizons as well, right? That new applicants can say, wow, look at what's come from this. Can you share with us some of the ways, some of the products that have come out of these, or some of the processes even that have come out of that experience?
Yeah. So one of the projects that has come out of one of the earlier Horizons is called Connected Risk Intelligence. And that's, I think that came out of the very first Horizons we did, and is a solution, an analytic solution to help our clients model and manage their risk better. So not as sexy as maybe some of the Apple products, but certainly something that our finance and risk management clients really need and love. Another one was called Predictive Analytics for Health. That was a couple of years ago. That helps our clients model the costs associated with their health and benefits and try to understand and predict what their costs are going to be going forward, and some interventions that might help to mitigate those costs. And then, of course, we've had a lot of other insurance related, risk related, and benefits related solutions and products in between.
Fantastic. I mean, nothing's going to compare to an Apple anything, right? I mean, if you're at Microsoft, you're still going like, it doesn't compare with an Apple product. But so what about some of the bumps along the way, though? I mean, no innovation happens flawlessly.
Sure.
I'm kind of curious, some of the bumps along the way, and maybe even some of the stories of how you help push through an innovation, even when there's potentially some headwind, some opposition to getting it to its finish line.
Yeah, well, many of our challenges, maybe not surprisingly, come from stakeholder management. We're a big company.
What does that mean, stakeholder management?
That means all the people we work with that also want to have a say in what happens to this project. With a big company, we also have a matrix structure. Anytime an idea for a new solution comes along, we have to engage with a lot of other stakeholders, leaders in the company, colleagues in our company, whose projects or work will be impacted. And it's not just a single engagement. It's continuous engagement with multiple stakeholders. So it can be time consuming, it can be exhausting, but when people aren't on board, they can become detractors and can quickly, cause problems for an innovation project. So it's kind of change management 101, right? So we need to explain to the stakeholders continuously the vision for the solution, how it will impact our clients, our company, get their feedback, bring them along in the journey. No one wants to be told this is what we're going to do. They want to have a say in it, right? So we need to bring everybody in under the umbrella, get them on board in order to successfully move forward.
And have you learned anything along the way about how to do that? Are there secrets? Are there shortcuts to getting that done?
If there are any shortcuts, I'd love to hear it. I'm sure our teams would love to hear it. But I just time and time again, I realize I can never communicate, or the teams can never communicate enough. And they, as I mentioned, it's not just informing people and having one conversation, it's continuous communications and engagement with the key stakeholders and understanding people's perspectives, listening, taking in their feedback. And again, if there's a shortcut to this, if any of your listeners have a shortcut to this, please let me know. But we haven't found one yet.
I'm reminded of what Oprah used to say. Absolutely every guest who ever came on her show proved to her one thing, that everyone wants their story heard. And that her platform, more than anything else, was a place for people to tell their story, but to have the reassurance that they were heard. Mm-hmm. And she said, from the time that you are the smallest child walking into the kitchen, looking back at mom or looking back at dad, there is that desire for acceptance when you walk in the room, creating a sense of belonging and saying, you have my full attention, I'm listening. And that alone, for the most part, is like what I always remind people is step one in storytelling is listening. Before you even open your mouth to share what's going on is, can we listen first? And it's the hardest thing to do, surprisingly, is that set of listening. But I also like what you had to say about endless, frequent communications. And the other thing, a reminder of when people tell their stories, and even as innovators, when we tell them, that storytelling is the greatest memory-making device on the planet. Like the reason why 3 bullets or an Excel spreadsheet and the information that we work so hard to get into them doesn't stick is because our brain isn't wired to receive the information that way. We actually need to wrap it in a story if we ever want anyone to remember it, step one. And step two is if we want anyone to share it with their colleagues, which is the most important part when you leave the meeting, is that the information is being played in an effective game of telephone, that one person is sharing it with the next. So you don't have to do the endless heavy lifting around constant communication, because hopefully the people take the story in and then can pass it along too, so that the communication task gets lighter, hopefully over time.
Yeah, that's so true. And it certainly helps to have an inspirational product leader who can paint the vision and tell that story for what the new product or solution can do for the company. That's kind of your quintessential founder, entrepreneurial type. It's very
our Steve Jobs type.
Very inspirational. But there's also nothing like feedback from real clients talking about how this new solution would impact their business. And as I mentioned, we do a lot of testing and get a lot of feedback from clients. And I always encourage teams to come back with those videos and quotes from clients, because it's so compelling to hear it straight from them. That really helps to tell the story. It's not just my opinion or the product lead's opinion. People can hear it straight from clients, and that makes it so much more personal and compelling.
Yeah. And it's objective from the person who's trying to push the new innovation idea, right? It says, don't believe me, believe the customer.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. And we know the research has shown us that user-generated content, when other people get excited and start talking about it, is 60% more credible. It's more believable, whether that's to internal audiences or external audiences, than the stuff we say ourselves. So if we actually want anyone to believe us, they have to believe them first. It's kind of strange, right? It's like an inside-out sock. But that is actually, if we want to wear it the right way, we actually have to get the outside first before we believe it on the inside.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great metaphor.
So as you continue on this path and generate innovation, some things aren't going to make it to their finish line. Some things are going to fail, right? And by some rights, we always say we help an innovation reach its finish line. That finish line might be failure. It might not scale. The customers might hate it. It might be the best idea possible, but not the right time. There's not the right resources. What do you do when you've, invested your heart and soul into an innovation and yet womp, like it just kind of, it dies? Like, what happens then when you hit failure? And I hate that word because it sounds so finite, but
yeah, a lot of people have a problem with the word failure and they want to call it learning. I mean, I don't have a problem with the word failure, and I don't have any problem saying that a lot of the products I worked on failed. And I think in high tech, there was more of a mentality that's just part of the process, that some things are going to fly and others aren't, and just keep moving on. I know when I was at Apple, I worked on a project trying to address one of our biggest customer complaints in that Macs weren't compatible with PCs. And so we're on this team trying to figure out how to solve that problem. And we came up with this idea for a new version of the Mac that had a dual processor, where one mode was regular Mac operating system, and then you would do a soft reboot to PC mode. And we thought, this is great. It's going to solve everyone's problems. We codenamed it Houdini because you press a button and presto, up comes the PC. Well, we started showing this to customers and they hated.
Why was that?
They just thought it was an abomination. And the way it was done too, with the soft reboot, was not very sexy. And Macs have always had, and Apple products have always had this reputation of being very sleek and sexy and seamless experience. And this was just not that. So we had to scrap the whole project. And here we thought we were coming up with something that would be the next big thing and light the world on fire. And then a couple of weeks later, we're all out trying to find new jobs with Apple. So I think that also speaks to you can't build something in a vacuum. Like you said, it's not just like what I think is going to work. You have to get feedback from real people.
Oh my God, I would have killed for that back in the day, by the way, because the software machinations that we went through to kind of ladder between
right.
was agonizing. And yet, yeah.
Right.
VMware, I think, started off. I think that was VMware's first product, was that toggle between.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. We were on to the right problem. I always say that I live by that mantra: fall in love with the problem, not the solution, because I've seen so many people and so many teams fall in love with their solution and they will go down swinging with it, even in the face of all evidence to the contrary from customers saying this isn't the solution we want. But they still stick to that solution. I think we just have to keep our eye focused on what is the problem we're trying to solve and be open to different ways to solve it.
Yeah. Oh, I would have loved that Houdini. But so what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing innovators today, especially working in a $9 billion company? What do you find innovators are up against?
I think the pace of change is so intense today. We live in a global 24/7 world with technology leaps and bounds and constantly evolving. It's just really hard to keep up. And for innovators working in big companies, I talked about some of the challenges with the stakeholders, with conservatism, with respect to risk taking. I mean, as you mentioned, we're in the business of providing advisory to companies around their risks, and we're not as big a risk takers as, say, the companies I worked for in high tech. Mm-hmm. So I think the fear of failure or the experience of failure, here is different, both at a leadership level and colleague level. So we need to continue trying to build that innovation culture. And I love it when I hear some leaders say, look, we just need to try some new things, and not all of it's going to work out, but that's okay. We just have to keep trying new things. And I've heard some say that, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So when I hear our leaders talking that way, I know we've made at least a little bit of headway in building an innovation culture.
I ask people oftentimes on the show, what is emblematic of an innovation culture? Like, what is the trait? that makes a culture innovate? I don't want to say effortlessly because it's so much, but continuously, let's say, to not give up that innovative thread. Do you think there's a particular characteristic that makes that so?
Well, I think there's a couple, right? Providing colleagues with that psychological safety, if you will, to try new things, understanding that a lot of them aren't going to work, but learn from that and move on and not penalize people for failing. I think a bias for action is also another characteristic. Let's just jump in and try something and then iterate from there rather than trying for perfection. Let's get something out that's good enough and then build from there. I think those are some of the key traits anyway to building that innovation culture.
We had one of the top innovators from Tesla on the show who talked about Elon Musk was unveiling their new pickup truck. And he was responsible for the glass in the pickup truck.
Right.
And Elon's number 2 threw a steel snowball at the glass, which was supposed to be bulletproof, and it shattered. And he said, "Oh, we must have done something wrong. Let's try it again. Don't throw it so hard." And sure enough, the second window broke.
Yep, I remember that.
And then he showed up for work the next morning, and I think someone said, "Hey, nice glass," to him. I called out like down the hallway, "Nice glass." And I said, "Well, how did you feel about that?" He goes, "It's a pretty tough day. First day back." He goes, "But the lesson from that experience is that I still have a job. My colleagues gave me some healthy ribbing, but then we got right back to work and we figured out what was wrong. Probably don't hit the side of the car with a sledgehammer prior to throwing the steel snowball because it jarred the glass out of place. And as a result, it shattered. So maybe next time, follow the instructions of the demo. Don't go off script and hit the car with a sledgehammer prior where you're, warping the glass before we throw the snowball at it."
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's a great story.
But I think you're right. That psychological safety to go, okay, I could take a hit for my colleagues and some glass related metaphors that get called out across the office the next day.
Yeah, exactly.
But in any event, that psychological safety is important to know. I can really screw it up on a stage of many millions of people watching and still return to work, and I'll make it better tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah. So lesson for all you leaders out there, give people the space to fail, right? Or to screw it up and try again.
Right.
So how do you think 2022 and maybe beyond will look for innovators in corporate roles now? What do you think is harder or easier as a result of COVID?
I think anybody in a corporate role needs to continually prove their value and show results. There's just no getting around that. Otherwise, you're just overhead and you're the first people to go in a reorg, right? So we have to continually prove our value, show results, show what's working. On the subject of remote working, I think it's easier in that now we can really get diverse teams together virtually, where it used to be thought that you had to have in-person meetings to get anything done or to get teams together. Now we've proven that's not the case. We've had a number of new solutions developed by virtual teams over the past 2 years.
Amazing.
But it is harder to get those serendipitous conversations going that may spark an innovative idea. We try to do that virtually, but it's just harder. You just have to work harder at it. And we still need to get back in person. It's not going to be completely virtual. And we've just started business traveling again. But I don't think we'll be going back to the way things were 2 years ago with the amount of travel we had. And I think that's a good thing because I think a lot of that travel was unnecessary. But there's still times when you need to get people in a room and or people together and those kind of sparks happening that can lead to great things.
Yeah, I miss it. I will say one of the other things I find just doing this storytelling work is that people are able to do great work remotely. They are able to talk to one another. That something about brainstorming and innovating that way, where you're kind of popcorning ideas off each other, is hard. But what I'm hearing from leaders also is that the employee engagement factor is the challenge of having like that kind of skin to skin at the table. that we don't get to share our stories with one another, our backstories and where we came from in casual ways that come up over the course of the day. Now, we all know about our kid running behind us in the room or our cat walking in front of the screen, certainly, right? Those are other stories that we probably wouldn't have told because our cat wasn't walking across our desk at work. But there's something to the employee engagement. And I think we'll come to find part of the Great Resignation is that inability to connect with one another by sharing our stories of who we are with one another. That doesn't get communicated easily across a Brady Bunch matrix on Zoom of just heads with one another. That individuated storytelling, because what we have always heard is that people quit their manager or people quit their coworkers because they don't like them. Well, part of it is that we never had a chance to know them. And I saw a Gallup poll that came out this week that said 40% of people who had resigned in the Great Resignation are already onto their next job. 40%.
Wow.
So, like when you think about the churn that leaders are dealing with today as a result of this experience are we taking the time to really get to know each other's stories in order to create a little bit more glue and cohesion with one another?
Yeah, that's very true.
So some of our hot seat questions are some of our guests' favorites. So I'll ask you this one. What do you think is one of the greatest innovations of all time? And you can choose a top 3 if you don't have a number 1, but greatest innovation of all time in human history.
I can't be that profound, especially on the spur of the moment. But practically speaking, I'd say the microwave because I don't know what I would do without it. But I think my current one would be the electric car, especially now as gas prices are soaring. But we've had electric cars for about 12 years. Last year, we bought a Tesla and they finally evolved the batteries so that we can actually drive long distances. Our first electric car only got, I think, 35 miles to a charge. So
wow.
That just shows, and now the Tesla gets 330, I think. So that just shows you how far that technology has come. We've got solar panels on our roof to power. And I think renewable energy, is a sustainable choice. And since it's Earth Day today,
yay,
I've been thinking about the future of our planet.
Fantastic. So what about if you had the opportunity to work on an innovation team? Which innovation team, again, anytime, in history, would you have loved to have been a part of?
I recently heard from a friend about Hedy Lamarr as an innovator. Most people recognize Hedy Lamarr as a Hollywood glamour girl from the 1940s and 50s, but she was also a gifted innovator. And few people know that, including myself, until my friend turned me on to the story. She co-developed this frequency hopping system during World War II to guide Allied torpedoes to their targets. And that later led to developments in Bluetooth and GPS. And some people have called her the mother of Wi-Fi. And I think it'd be really cool to have worked with her back then on some of these new inventions.
Amen, sister. Yeah, we featured her during Women's History Month and really call out women innovators because they get short shrift or they get left off the page far too often.
Exactly.
Yeah, well said. That would have been an amazing group of women to work with. Well, you've assembled a great group of women around you too, so following in great footsteps. And something that drives you crazy, pisses you off, or an innovation that you wish had been invented or you would love to see invented that is not yet invented.
You'd have to give me a lot more time on the show to talk about that.
I often share on this show when I ask my mom, who's 94, what is the greatest innovation of all time for her? She was like, that's so easy. Dishwasher pods. I'm like, come again? I was like, it's just dish powder in a pod. She goes, it's not just that. She goes, the fact that I can pop it in and walk away. I was like, what about the dishwasher? Isn't that the bigger invention? She goes, no, I can wash a dish, but to know reliably that they're going to come out done and clean, that's the greatest gift. To know it
great.
And to walk away. And I was like, oh, interesting. It's the confidence of knowing and the reliability of it. So that's all you needed. I was like, 94 years on the planet.
That's all right.
And that's the most exciting thing. I mean, this woman didn't have a horse growing up, but here we are.
Practical things that we do every day really can turn our lives around.
Amen. Amen. Well, Karen, this was just such a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for joining me today, and cannot wait to hear what the super secret announcement is going to be. And I think I learned a new form of the word brokerage. I didn't know that it was a verb. So there you go.
Well, thanks for having me, Susan. It was fun.
Thank you so much. Now you might be asking, Susan, why innovation storytelling? Well, the truth is that an innovation story told well not only breaks down communication barriers so you can drive change and new growth, but it also helps other people remember and champion your work. And it propels your best ideas forward faster to secure you the runway, resources, and recognition you so richly deserve. In other words, stories are memory-making devices that significantly reduce the time it takes for you and your innovation to be understood. But like many leaders, you probably never got the memo that storytelling skills would be central to your success. Well, I've got some good news for you. It's not too late because I've got you covered. Whether you need an expert to come and speak to your innovation leaders, you need training in the art and method of innovation storytelling, or you just need the support and guidance of a consultant who can get you where you want to go in less time, visit www.susanlinder.com today to learn more and to set up a call to discuss your needs. I'm so looking forward to connecting with you and to helping you tell a great innovation story. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. And leave us a comment. Tell us what you think of this episode. We'd love to hear from you. And if you didn't like what you've heard, just forget everything I've said.